All right, guys, let's see how we can create one user in Kubernetes. For this, initially, we'll create one local user. We'll use the command user_add -m for creation of local directory and the user, so it will be my user. And now we can enter inside of this directory. We see that there is nothing here. And now we create a private key for this user with the following command. Actually, we would like to save the key in myuser.key file, and we're using a special algorithm here. The next thing is to use this key to create certificate signing requests. Okay, let's create one request using this key and also certificate signing request file where we're creating it with the subject where the name of the user is my user, so the user that we created. Now the next command will create a base 464 representation of the contents of this file, trimming some new lines and headings. So this is the information that we need, and we can put it inside of the certificate signing request manifest for Kubernetes. Okay, so here is the script that will create this. Basically, we're using kubectl apply. This is the manifest, and we have filled the previous information directly inside of the request field. And let's run this command now. So we see that certificate signing request my user is being created. All right, because right now the request is pending, we need to approve it. So with the certificate approve my user, we'll approve this certificate. And the next is to see what's inside of it. So we can use describe CSR my user. That's what we have. It expires in 24 hours as we have specified. Okay, the next command is to save the information from the certificate signing request and to extract only the certificate from there, to decode it because it's encoded with base 64, and to save it into myuser.crt file. And now we have this myuser.crt file where we have our certificate. Let's now create one role binding. It will be of name myuser_cluster role binding, and we'll give just view verb permissions to the user, my user inside of our cluster. Okay, let's create this, and we see that it has been created. So here is something important for microk8s. We need to enable the role-based access controls. So this is important for you to continue, because by default, this is not enabled and we don't have this cluster role view. In order to get the cluster role bindings and role bindings in all namespaces, we'll use this command. Then we'll grab the information only for our my user. We see that we have the view verb permission and it's for our user, this role. And the other way to check whether we have installed the cluster role view inside of our cluster is with the get cluster role view and the output to be YAML. And when we have those verbs here filled, this means that we can proceed with the using of those role bindings. For the next command, we'll need some information for our cluster, such as where it's running its control plane, on which IP address, so that we can create our own configuration for our user. It will be called myuser.conf. And for now, as you can see, it's empty. We'll start filling those fields. So the first one command is to set the cluster default with the following configuration. We have an IP, the API address of our server, or the control plane field. Then we fill our certificate authority, which is under var snap microk8s current certificates. And we would like the output of this command to be merged with this config and written inside of our kubeconfig file, myuser.conf. So now we see this file created and we can see its contents. As you can see, the server field and the certificate authority data is being filled. And let's continue with the next command. We would like basically to fill the credentials for our users. So we use this long command where we're using our my user for this entity. Will be using its certificate and private key, and we'll embed those things inside of our configuration. And again, we'll check what we have inside of our myuser.conf file. As you can see, we have data right now under our users. The last thing is to fill the contexts. So we are setting up my user at default for the default cluster and for the user my user. Let's append this data to myuser.conf and see the result. As you can see here, the context is also filled and it's created. And now we can actually use this context. So with use context, my user default with this name and reading all the data from this file, myuser.conf, we'll be able to switch our context. Now, what's interesting is that we have some deployments here. So kubectl get all minus all namespaces. We see that we have nginx deployment and it has been created using the master account. If you remember, we have created cluster role binding where we had given permission only to view to our user. We can check this with this command. Okay, so now if I try to get all the pods, as you can see, we are impersonating with this user and trying to run get pods command. It will give us answer that we can see all the pods and execute this command. But when we execute update of our deployments, we should be able to see that we cannot do this, signifying that our cluster role binding is working correctly. If we try to run, for example, the following command to increase the replicas using the configuration of myuser.conf, we'll see that we are forbidden to do this, signifying that our rule is being applied